Right, welcome back to the Ben Bowman YouTube channel. I hope you guys are doing well. The videos are back. Tottenham are back. And I'm really excited to bring you this one today, actually. Me, Seb On Football, and Kish from Lilywhite Lab sat down and had a really good in-depth conversation about the squad next year. We've done a keep or sell format. We've had some really good in-depth conversations around some of the players, the roles they might have next year. So I'm really excited about it. Longer format for the channel, obviously. I hope you guys like that. And please do let me know in the comments as well. Please get involved, like, subscribe if you're new, all that good stuff. I'm really looking forward to bringing it to you. I've got another video coming out later this week with Seb and Kish as well. Again, longer format, more podcasty style, where we go through all of the manager options for next season as well. So I hope you're looking forward to that one. Get involved in the comments. I've left the link in the description to the tier list for you guys to do your own one as well. There's going to be another video coming out on the channel tomorrow where I'm talking about Christian Romero and his importance to this Tottenham team. So make sure to subscribe, turn notifications on for that one, and yeah, enjoy the video. Right, I'm joined by Kish from Lilywhite Lab and Seb on Football. We're going to be doing a keep or sell for Tottenham this summer. We're going to be going through the entire squad, players currently out on loan as well. We're going to be talking about whether they're going to be a key player for Tottenham next season, squad player, whether they should go out on loan or whether they should be gone, whether they should be sold. Obviously, we don't know who the manager for Spurs is going to be next year, whether it's still going to be Ange, whether it's going to be someone else, Iriola, Frank. We've actually got another video about that coming out later this week as well, where we talk through some of our options and who we think might be a good fit for Spurs, so stay tuned for that. But in this video, it's kind of hypothetical. We don't know who the manager's going to be. It's just whether they're going to be a key player or a squad player if they are going to stay. So we'll start off with... let's start off with Richarlison, because I feel like Richarlison is a very divisive player amongst the fan base in terms of people that have kind of been bought into him for such a long time. They've really wanted him to do well. But I feel like the injuries this season especially have massively taken its toll for him, and he's just not been available to kind of support Dom Solanke, and I feel like a lot of fans might feel like it's time for Richie to move on. Or, Kish, I'm going to start with you. Do you give him one more season, or do you feel like this is where we maybe try and cash in? Obviously, he didn't want to leave last year. There was a chance for him to leave. He's talked a lot about turning Saudi down, not wanting to go there. They've come in for him quite a few times. What do you think should happen with Richie next year?
Yeah, I think it's time now. I think last season was the kind of crossroads season where, you see if he can stay fit for a whole campaign. This year, it hasn't worked out there. I think he's still disrespected in terms of actual ability. I think there's a place for him in most teams in the world in terms of a player that presses like crazy. Um, is great at kind of creating chances amongst chaos and kind of like packed penalty areas because he'll scrap it out with centre backs. He's flexible. He can play across the three, and he's pretty like his link up. I think has been a bit of a weakness of his, but it's not terrible. Um, he can play. He can play out on left. He can play out on the right. I think. Yeah, I think he's a good player. I think he needs to go somewhere where the league demands are going to be smaller in terms of intensity,
Yeah.
physicality, where he can get a run of games. And I still think he can get a great goal return for a team in a league that's just less intense. But for us, I think we're at a point where we need to be kind of shifting these players who have kind of overstayed. And I think he's in that group.
I think so. I also think with him, like whatever manager comes in at Tottenham next year, whether it's Iriola, for example, we're probably going to make a progressive appointment in terms of someone's philosophy and style, in terms of being aggressive, playing on the front foot, pressing from the front. And again, whether it's Ange or not, who's here next year, he's probably going to break down exactly the same as he has done over the last couple of seasons, regardless of who we appoint. So I'd be with you, Seb. Do you think it's kind of time now for him to move on? And what sort of fee do you think Spurs could like realistically demand for someone like Richie?
Not much. I think my thing with Richarlison was when he got back fit in that sort of December, January time, I was like, maybe he could have the last 4 or 5 months of the season. If he can get a run in the team, maybe, if he can regain that match fitness, sort of become a valuable member of the squad, contribute, he might have been able to stay another year if he'd sort of got a little bit of that fan base back on side. But unfortunately now he's picked up another injury, probably won't contribute much to the rest of the season, and it does feel like his time is done here. Probably the fee you'd be looking at would be around, I don't know how long he's got left in his contract, is it 2 years in the
He's
summer?
got a couple of years, yeah.
Yeah, so probably about, maybe you could get 25 to 30 from him somewhere in Europe. After, maybe you go somewhere like the Serie A. I reckon that could maybe suit his game quite well, like a little bit of a slower pace in that league. So yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm with Kish. I think it is time to move on from Richarlison. I feel like that's pretty everyone, even the people who love Richarlison the most would probably admit that it is time to part ways.
I feel like there's going to be still some people that are holding on out there. People love
probably.
Richie, don't they? And to be fair, like
he's a lovable character.
Yeah, he's always, I think everybody does. Like, he's played with his heart on his sleeve. Like, he works really hard. It's just never properly come together for him for a long enough period of time at Tottenham. Like, even last year when he did have that run in the second half of the season, he got another injury and then it all kind of just fell apart. I think one thing that Richie did well for Spurs, though, is that he did make people realise that this system needed a number 9. Like, when he played when he got that run of games playing as the striker, after Son was playing up front at the start of the season, I think he made us realise and probably made us go out and buy someone like Solanke. So we can
be unreal for that 10-game period.
Yeah, I think that Solanke signing has shown that. Well, I mean, it's bad news for him, I think, because Solanke, not only is he technically good, he's got that kind of ability to hold the ball up, scrap out the centre backs when we're under pressure. You know, we can go long at times to Solanke, and I think that was one thing that Richarlison was maybe there for at times. Like, obviously, I don't like Son as a 9, but at times they were kind of alternating between Richarlison and Son as a 9, and they were kind of two opposite types of players. I think Solanke can now kind of do most of what Richarlison can do, and that's kind of obviously bad news for him.
Yeah, agreed. I think we're all unanimous on that. Let's go to some of the younger players then. Let's go for a few players that are also out on loan maybe at the moment. So I'm going to put them all in loan for now and we can kind of move them about. So I've got Jamie Donnelly obviously on loan at Leyton Orient. We've got Josh Keeley as well. We've got Luka Vuskovic. We've got Alfie Dorrington. We've got Yang as well. We've also got, let's go for some other loan players. We've got Solomon out on loan. Alfie Devine out on loan. Brian Hill out on loan. Scarlett is obviously still here. Is there anyone else? Oh, Ashley Phillips as well. What are we saying about some of these boys? Seb, is there anyone from the start you want to speak about and maybe an impact they can have at Tottenham next year, or anyone you think we should just be getting rid of?
Jamie Donnelly's the one that I'm really looking at. I mean, obviously we all know how we feel about Jamie Donnelly in terms of a talent, that ball striking ability. I just feel like he's someone who, give him the pre-season, get involved in that squad, and he's somebody that could definitely be in and around that first team picture next year. I feel like he's somebody who's easily good enough, and sort of when he's dropped down the leagues, he's had some unreal moments for Leyton Orient so far this season. I think he's had a little minor injury. He's been in and out of the team a bit more over the last month, but over that sort of Christmas period, he really grew into that team and was brilliant for them. And I feel like he's somebody with the technical ability that he's got can make that step up to Premier League level quite comfortably, you would hope. And I think he's someone I'm really looking at for that. I think someone I'd definitely put in sell would be Manor Solomon. I just don't see the need or the use for him next season in our squads. I think he's barely played for Spurs ever. He's done okay at Leeds, but I've also seen some Leeds fans saying, please, can we not sign him next season? Like, he's not been that good, and they've obviously got other wingers in that squad. And when you look at Odebear, Tell, if we sign him permanently, Sonny will still be here. Min Hyuk Yang as well is obviously in that list. I just do not see the need for Manor Solomon. So I'll put those two in those two places, I think.
Yeah, Kish, what were you saying about Jamie Donnelly? What do you think he could? Do you think he will still be around at Spurs next year, or do you think he maybe needs another loan, a step up to a Championship to kind of get more consistent games?
Yeah, I'd imagine he'd go out on loan, but I agree. I'd have a look at him in pre-season. I think the thing with Donnelly is like his technique is probably up there with our best players. Full stop. Yeah. Like whether on loan or at the club. I think for me there are some physical concerns in terms of not in terms of like strength or anything like that, but in terms of how he can turn, how he can move. I think at times he looks a little bit sluggish, and that's kind of, I think I assume is something he's working on. Where I think he could shine as a first team player is when we're trying to pick the lock of a stubborn back four, back five.
Yeah, 100%.
That type of ball striking, you know, often you don't get many openings in those kind of games, and it's about kind of when those opportunities arise, is whether that's like a 30-yard screamer or that's like a clip ball to the back post that's just on the money. Like those kind of moments he's definitely capable of, and we don't have many players like that in the squad. It's just whether that's right for his development to be used in that kind of way. And I think, I think in my eyes, like, it's probably the smarter thing to probably loan him out again. but I
I
also
agree with
think
that.
there is a
Yeah,
place for him in the squad. So it's a difficult one. What if the loan is happens again? It should be to a higher level, I think.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and
Do
I
you,
think
do you,
sometimes we see these like lower league loans, and we see the player not getting much games there, and I don't think that's necessarily reflective of their ability. I think sometimes these type of players need to be at a better team where they can shine more, and where the kind of strategy of the team is built around those kind of players. So that's something also worth noting.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Would you say the same for Josh Keeley as well? Obviously at Leyton Orient as well, shining, has a lot of good games for them, had a lot of big moments for them as well. Would you say that he would probably just need another loan and just step him up maybe to the Championship next year as well?
For me, yeah, keepers are like a more straightforward thing. I think keepers often don't break into sort of top level clubs until, 25, 26, unless they're
Yeah,
like crazy prospects.
yeah.
I
He's
think for
got a long
him,
way
it's
to
just
go at Spurs as well with the
yeah,
players in front of him, hasn't he? Really?
exactly. I think it's constant minutes for keepers. That's the most important thing. Like they need to be the number one or whatever ever club they go to.
Yeah,
And whether that's possible for to step them up and find them a club that's going to give him the number one, or if that has to be a division below, that's also fine. I think the most important thing that he's just playing week in, week out.
yeah. Agreed with that. Are there any other players here that you kind of wanted to pick out and talk about and move around a little bit? I think we should keep. I think we've probably unanimously decided Jamie and Josh probably needed another loan, maybe a step
yeah.
up next year. We've obviously got other players out on loan. We've got Alfie Dorrington, who's at Aberdeen. I think he scored his first goal at the weekend, actually.
Yeah.
We've got Yang, who scored at the weekend for QPR as well. Solomon, who you
Yeah.
mentioned. Solomon, I think we can probably unanimously say sell. I think with the
Yeah.
depth
Yeah.
at wingers that we've got, and probably looking
Yeah.
to bring one more in the summer at
Get him
least.
gone.
Get him gone.
Brian Hill.
Brian
Brian
Hill.
Hill. Get that guy gone
Well,
as
he's
well, mate.
Brian Hill's injured at the moment, isn't he? Did he pick up an
Yeah.
injury that's going to keep him out for like basically the rest of the season?
Yeah.
He's been
So
good out on loan. Again, that's not gonna. I don't think he's gonna cut it in the Premier League. But
No.
we shouldn't be like, releasing him from his contract or anything like that. He's got some value,
Yeah, I
and
agree with that.
I think we can get 10 to 15 million from a Spanish club. And he's a talent. He's a talented player. He just doesn't quite suit the league, I think,
yeah,
is the main
he's
issue.
really technical, but physically just never really looked like he's going to be able to make that step
Yeah.
up, has
He
he?
had
Veliz,
Go on.
go on to the next one. Veliz is a strange one. I literally have no idea what he's good at. I don't think I've ever watched him play football apart from when he's come on in those few games for Spurs, and then obviously got injured, and then we didn't really see him again. He's out on loan at, is it Getafe this season? And he's just
Espanyol,
no
I think.
Espanyol,
Espanyol.
sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
And he's just, I think he's barely played for them. Really, barely started many games in the second half of this season. Just feels like it felt like such a weird signing at the time from Spurs, but it felt like one of those where, because it was so left field, it was like, okay, is this going to be really exciting, or is it actually just going to be a bit of a dud? And I don't know. I don't know whether we should give him another chance, or whether Dane Scarlett is ahead of him in the pecking order.
Well, I was going to say I'm going to bring Will Lancashire and where's Dane Scarlett? I'm going to bring Dane Scarlett into this conversation
Yeah.
as well in terms of like what Spurs do next season generally with our striking options.
Yeah.
Out of those three, which one out of Veliz, Lancashire, and Scarlett do you think is most likely to be pushing to actually be kept and be a first team player at Spurs next year? Probably just as a squad player,
Yeah.
but who do you think is most likely to have the best chance of succeeding?
Dane Scarlett, probably, I'd say. I think in terms of somebody, if Ange Postecoglou's still here, definitely Scarlett. I think Lancashire is somebody who will definitely need another loan. He hasn't really played at West Brom. That felt like sort of one in January where it was maybe an opportunity, but then I think they signed Adam Armstrong, who's like
Yeah.
one of the best strikers in the Championship, a day later, which was a shame for him. And he's only really got a few sporadic moments off the bench for them, a few sporadic minutes, sorry. And yeah, I think he's another loan. I think you'll probably have to sell one of them. I mean, you could loan two of them back out and sort of keep one of them in and around the squad as that third choice. I'd probably keep Dane Scarlett in and around the squad. I think he's proven that he can come... Because the thing is as well, he's had so many loans now. He's been at Ipswich, he's been at Pompey, he's been at Oxford, and he's just not really sort of made that step up and became that main guy for any of them. I feel a
Yeah.
bit sorry for him, to be honest. And like Kish said, sometimes these players need to be shining at a high level, and sort of when he's been playing in these teams, he's been playing at a team that's been scrapping for relegation, Oxford United this season, where they can't almost take that gamble on that young player, which makes it a bit of a nonsensical loan in the first place. But yeah, Kish, what do you reckon? I'm not sure on those
I mean,
last two.
that's how I feel about the Veliz loan a little bit. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm not sure I'm pretty sure they're under Bordalas, who's getting criticized loads in Spain because he's
yeah,
an ultra defensive
Yeah,
coach. I'm sure he managed Espanyol, and that's not the kind of environment we want to be sending our young players to because they're never going to play that way at Spurs.
no,
I think there's certain times where that might be beneficial if they want a player to kind of, improve work ethic or something specific. But to be honest, more often than not, we want our players to be going to play at clubs that are going to play a quite similar style to us and that they're definitely going to get minutes at. So for someone
yeah,
like Lancashire, I think Championship makes sense because
agree.
they'll never question his size because he's physically there. He's physically like above there. He's great physically. For him, it's his technical game that he needs to work on. I think
yeah,
that makes sense. Whereas someone like Yang, for me at the moment, it makes more. I mean, I'm surprised he's got as many minutes as he has at QPR.
Yeah,
But for me, that made sense to send him to, Eredivisie or Belgium or whatever, where he can just get minutes for a club that dominates possession and he
yeah.
can, get used to even the European game because the English game is a step up from most of those leagues anyway.
Do you think
Um,
that will
yeah,
happen next season? Because I think part of the reason, like when you said there about like loaning someone out to kind of work on something specific, it felt like with Yang, it was definitely a way to help him acclimatise to England and kind of get
yeah,
used to playing
definitely.
English football. So
yeah.
would you moving? Well, we'll come back to the strikers in a sec. What do you kind of see for Yang next year? Do you see another loan, or do you feel like it might be again? I feel like he's going to get had a good look at during pre-season, whoever the manager is. But do you think maybe a loan abroad would be the best option for him?
For me, I reckon they kept him at QPR because they wanted him to get accustomed to London, I assume.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And living in the UK and there's such a big kind of cultural impact of moving across the world. So I think for that made sense. For me, yeah, I think next season I'd want him again. Minutes is the key. Like
Definitely.
I'm so much less bothered about the level if that means that they're not going to get minutes. Like they just need to be
yeah,
playing men's football. And for him, he's talented enough where he could go to a Belgium top club, a Dutch, top six club or whatever, and probably be one of their best players. Um, so I think, yeah, for me, I'd loan him again, and most likely abroad where those physical deficiencies aren't going to hold him back from minutes. If those physical deficiencies like are going to impact him, but he's going to play games, that's fine. That's fine to have loaned him in England if he's got guarantees of starting a certain amount of games. But if a manager's going to look at him and be like, I don't think he's up for it for this game or whatever, then I think then we should be looking abroad.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
100%. That makes
In terms
sense.
of and so in terms of strikers, then I feel like obviously I think we agreed on Lancashire then in terms of getting another Championship loan. The issue I have maybe with Dane Scarlett, and it's not necessarily an issue that I have with him as a player, but I think from his perspective, especially if Spurs don't win the Europa League next year and we're not in Europe, I mean he'd be unlikely to get Champions League minutes for Tottenham next year
Yeah,
anyway.
where would he get
He
minutes?
wouldn't. He's not going to get Europa League minutes because we're not going to qualify, or
Yeah,
Europa Conference League. I don't see him getting any minutes, and maybe he gets to a point where he gets a bit frustrated and then pushes maybe for a move away permanently. I think
yeah,
another loan would do him good, but again, he's just not really been able to kind of hit the ground running. But I'd still believe in him. I still like what I see with Scarlett, and I feel like we said, we don't know if Ange's going to be the manager next year, but Ange clearly likes him. I think there's a really talented player there,
he's
so
been
I'd
good
probably
when he's come on this season. Like
yeah,
he's impressed me. That
I'd,
flick on against Ipswich for Kulusevski, the
yeah.
goal in the Europa League as well. I like Dane Scarlett. I've not given up
Yeah,
on him
not
yet. I
not to
must
bang
say.
the same drum, but again, like I think a European loan makes sense for him, even though because he's tried so many here that haven't really worked. And we've seen Troy Parrott, like
Yeah,
even if
exactly.
Yeah,
we don't want to keep him long term or whatever, it just bumps up that value. Like we would have never got the money we got for Troy Parrott, even though it wasn't much
Yeah,
um, before that season. I think
yeah,
that's the key of I think often people look at loans as like they're going out on loan to come back and play for Tottenham. That's not always how it goes. Like
yeah,
yeah,
often
I
it's to
agree.
boost value, and that's how I feel about Lancashire. I personally don't think Lancashire is good enough to make it at Spurs, and it's more about getting him on showcase where his talents are, where people can see him, and he's a good player. Like he'll make it at Premier League level in my eyes. Like we need scouts aren't going to sign a player who's never played men's football, if that makes sense,
Exactly.
or like
yeah,
never really cut it at men's football. So I
Yeah.
think
yeah.
So
that's
I feel like we're set on that. Then Alea Valiz, then what do we reckon? Like just quickly, keep. Do you think it's worth giving him a lower loan, or do you think maybe cash in on him
I'd
if we
probably
can?
cash in now, to be honest.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think I would agree.
so would I.
Just
He's
because we've
he's a bit
got
older as well, isn't he? Is he 21, 22?
Yeah,
So yeah, he's not. It's not even like he's young as Lancashire is 19. I think. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think Dorrington's one who's just straight in for another loan. I think he's
Yeah,
had
I
the
think
6
so.
months at Aberdeen. I
Well, this has
think.
been his first loan as well, isn't it? So I feel like he
Yeah,
definitely needs another one.
and he
Um,
obviously had that big injury as well. So it's sort of like game time is king for him. I think at this point too.
agree. Ashley Phillips. I haven't been keeping up to date
Weird
too
one
much
with
about how
him.
he's getting on at Stoke, but
He starts for them every week. I think pretty much every
Yeah,
week. I think he's been
that's why.
quite
That's
good,
why
quite solid.
for me, I'd cash in now. Um,
yeah,
Yeah,
they've got an opportunity to maybe
because
come in and
yeah,
buy him.
again, that's the key. It's like his value's higher than it was. He's not good enough on the ball, in my opinion, to cut it at Spurs, especially when we're playing and trying to play this more progressive style. Like
yeah,
he's a great like athlete, and he's a solid box defender. But again, I think people need to change their perception of these young signings we make. The club aren't always making them to necessarily be key players for Spurs. They're making them because
Yeah,
they have sell-on value, and he's one of those.
yeah.
Like I can't remember how much we bought him for, but I'm sure we'll make profit on
it
him.
wasn't a lot. I think it was
I
like in
think
the hundreds of thousands. I don't even think it was a.
wasn't it 2 mil? I thought it
I
was
might
two
have been
mil.
2 mil. Like it
Yeah.
was.
Yeah,
I'm not.
But
I
he's
can't
exactly.
he's
remember.
one who I feel like with the I think he's 20 now, turning 21 this year. So I think he's one of those where if he's not going to make it at Spurs now, or at least have a proper look in at Spurs, then he probably won't. And yeah, Kish is right. It's probably the time to sell for him too. The door's not really open there.
I think so. Before we get on to like the final young centre back, let's quickly talk about Alfie Devine, who's obviously been at Westerlo with Luka Vuskovic. What do
Yeah.
you make of him as a talent, Kish, just generally, before you sort of speak about where you think he might be best placed to go next season if he
Uh,
doesn't stay at Spurs?
he's one of those for me that would shine at a high level. I think he's one of those that like is so technically, physically, and mentally capable. Like just comfortable on the ball. Like quite refined. Like wouldn't make any major errors. Never looks really out of place. I think even in pre-season when you've seen him play, he just looks tidy. Like he
Yeah.
he
Yeah,
can he can hang at that level. Like it's not a big step up for him. I think with him again, it's been minutes on loans, and I think he's had good spells at this loan. I think pretty sure he got injured at one point. I don't know if he's injured now.
I think he's injured
He's
Um,
now.
injured
Yeah,
now. Yeah, a couple of
He's
weeks ago.
he's been like one of the best at all England youth tournaments, like throughout the age groups. He always shines for them. Like he's a very talented player. Um, Again, it's so difficult to know where the squad building is going to be at in the summer. But if there's any of these, barring Vuskovic, who I'd want to see in pre-season and see how they cut it, it would be him. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
definitely.
just because I think he's that kind of player that can kind of make that step up.
What do you think that step up could be? Do you think that could be a lower Prem loan maybe next year or top higher Championship? Because he obviously was at Plymouth last season, and there were. I don't think he was. From what I remember, he wasn't really wasn't being played in his proper position. He was playing a little bit deeper,
Yeah.
and it didn't. He had some decent performances at Plymouth, but it wasn't. He didn't exactly set the world alight. But do you think you would go straight back in there for another Championship loan maybe next year or European again?
I think with a new manager, there's always like, if it is a new manager next season, there's always that kind of one player who, by like, you don't expect to be
Yeah,
kind of integrated into the squad. Every new manager does it. There's always someone who you think's done at the club or whatever and I can see not necessarily it being him, but I can see him being in contention for that kind of, oh, like just kind of seamlessly enters the squad, plays a few minutes. Like the thing as well about him is he can play 10, 8. He can probably play in a double pivot as well.
yeah,
He's flexible. He's homegrown, which is
yeah,
obviously another plus. I can see the club keeping one of him or Donnelly around next summer,
yeah. I wouldn't be
depending on
surprised.
their transfer plans with the midfield. But especially if we're going to have a bit of an overhaul in midfield, I can see one of them staying, and I'd rather Donnelly went out and got loan minutes than see Devine around the squad just because where they're at in their careers. But
Yeah.
it's hard to know, I guess.
I hear that. I do hear that. I want to see. There's all Alfie Devine's a player that like where he came obviously from Wigan when he was very young. He always has kind of left you wanting more. He made an impact when he was very young. Tottenham's youngest ever goal scorer in that game against Marine. There's always been a lot of hype around him. Like you say, he always does really well for England at youth level as well. I'm kind of with you on that. Like I would like to see him get kept around. I think my gut would say probably okay, it would be good for him to get another loan. But like you said, when new managers come in, there's always a couple of surprises, and he's technically very, very secure. So I wouldn't be surprised. I think loan would probably be best, but I think
Yeah.
again, I wouldn't be surprised if he sticks around. Should we? Um, let's talk about Luka Vuskovic before we move on to some of the more senior players. How much of a chance do you give him actually making a big impact at Tottenham next year? Do you think he will be kept around, or do you think they'll maybe give him pre-season and have a look and then maybe send him out on loan again? Either of you, feel free to go with that.
How do you go?
I mean, he seems like a bit of a unicorn defender, really, doesn't he? I mean, he seems like somebody who is so ridiculously talented for his age. And I mean, you look at all the stats, like the amount of goals he scores are sort of. I was looking at his like tackle and interceptions numbers, like ridiculously high for his age group at his level. And I think he is someone I'd like to see in and around the squad next season. Where he's like 17, I don't feel like the rush to send him out on loan. He's not like 19, 20 years old. I feel like there's definitely a place for him to maybe be that fourth choice, fifth choice centre back for Spurs next year. Maybe pick up some minutes here and there, and just sort of see how he develops. Let him settle into life in London as well. Obviously, very important for those youngsters to get that experience and just be in and around the club. I feel like for a year, and where he is that talented, you never know how quickly he's going to make strides forward in his game. And I feel like, you've seen players be 17, 18 years old. He'll be 18 by the time he joins us, won't he? So at 18 years old, break into that first team and just sort of surprise everybody. And I feel like he is somebody who definitely has the talent, the physical capabilities. The bloke looks about 25, 30. He's not an 18-year-old. So
That's crazy.
I feel like he's definitely someone who I've got my eye on in pre-season, thinking if he impresses in pre-season, there's no reason why he can't be on the bench for Tottenham next year and be really in and around and involved as that squad player. And as we've seen with injuries at Spurs this season, you never know how quickly you could become higher up in that pecking order. I think that'd be quite exciting for us.
Yeah, Kish, do you feel the same?
Yeah, I strongly agree with that. I think, like Seb said, I think because he's 17, there's no rush. Like if it doesn't quite work out in terms of minutes, like if we're not in Europe next season or whatever, there's always capabilities of sending him out on loan in January. Obviously, centre backs tend to peak later as well. I think 17 for a centre back seems so young, but where he's so special is like he just looks so commanding and assured at that age. And like in terms of, for me, when I watch centre backs, there's just like a certain feeling you get with the way they defend, where they're so confident. They like expect to win every header, every duel, and he has that. I think one thing that's been kind of talked about, but also over exaggerated a little bit, is his pace. I think like he's quite stiff on the turn in terms of like, when a team's defending high and then the ball gets played in behind, it's that kind of ability to turn and then sprint. I think once he gets in his stride, he's not actually slow. It's just more about that kind of turning radius. It's quite big. I think also like slight concern is again channel defending. So when he's isolated out wide by a tricky quick winger who can turn inside out, it's the fact he's so big and so strong that obviously that often impacts athleticism. Again, that's kind of profiling as the opposite of an Ange centre back, so that doesn't kind of fit well there. But in terms of everything else, in terms of his on the ball capabilities off both feet, he can ping it left and right with ease. He can play through the lines. He's a monster in the air. Like he's a solid box defender. He's pretty complete even at his age. And he's the kind of player that might potentially be demanding first team assurances next season, which is like we see go up in terms of the young players now have more power. You've seen that with Mikey Moore even in terms of his reasons for signing a contract. Nwaneri at Arsenal, he demanded like first team assurances. I think that's one we'd have to kind of deal with, I think. But he's one that we should be definitely building around for the future. Like he's a joke.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I'd agree. And also, like, that's part of the reason why some of these players come to Tottenham, because of the sort of thing that we're building towards with the young players, that side of the recruitment. They know they're probably going to get opportunities. And I feel like Vuskovic is one, regardless of whether we get European football or not next year, who will be in and around the squads all the time, will be on the bench. And we're going to come on to Romero and Van der Ven, who would obviously be keeps for us. You'd imagine, like we know with their injury history, there will be opportunities regardless of the lack of game time that he feel like he might have if we're not in Europe. So I'm really excited to see him. I think, like you said, Seb, he's very much a unicorn kind of profile, very unique. Like can do so much, so well rounded. Such a freak at such a young age, and I'm excited to see him in pre-season. Let's just rattle some more obvious ones off out of the way in terms of getting rid. Timo Werner.
See you later, Sam.
See you later. Who else have we got here? Sergio Reguilon, where are you? Yeah, you're gone.
The strange thing is, some fans will genuinely still want to keep him.
It's the classic thing of like, you're a better player when you're not in the team, aren't you? Like,
It's so weird, mate. It's so weird. I mean, Reguilon, he's had like 2 slight cameos this season, and people just gone like, I saw people making like compilations of him and stuff. It's just like,
it's crazy.
Can we be serious, please?
It's absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
Let's go with
Basuma.
Basuma. Yeah, Basuma and Bentancur, I think, will be a conversation for a lot of people. Kish, where do you stand? Do you think both of them should be moved on, or would you keep? If you had to lean to keep one of them, who would you look at? But what would you do with both of them?
Looking to keep one of them, I would, if we were going to carry on with Ange next season and a single pivot and the things we ask our number 6 to do, I prefer Basuma.
Yeah, great.
If we were going to move to a new manager and we're going to play in a double pivot, which is what most managers play, I guess, or at least they play another 8 bit deeper, I'd lean towards Bentancur. So
I agree with that.
I think Bentancur is a better 8 than Basuma. I think Bentancur has a use, but neither of them for me are number 6, and I don't know why it's existed so long with them at number 6.
I think the thing for the club, though, is that we've seen all this stuff come out with offering Bentancur a new contract, his mentality, stepping up and becoming more of a leader in the team. And, you know, whatever people think about him as a player, I completely agree. Like, as a 6, he's been pretty much useless for the entirety of this season when he has been fit.
Yeah.
But I still think the club are clinging on to the fact of how good he was under Antonio Conte.
Yeah.
Like, this mentality, this leadership stuff. And I do feel like where Basuma has really let himself down was, I know that Bentancur also had that thing in the summer which was dreadful as well, and to be honest, I would not be upset if both of them were sold, but with Basuma at the start of the season, I felt like it was almost like he betrayed Ange's trust with that stuff that came out, and he was obviously dropped from the squad for a game. You just sort of feel like him sometimes. You're like, he's obviously so talented, he's been misprofiled. I remember watching him at Brighton when he was best, and he's playing sort of as a left-sided number 8 and sort of in that double pivot, and he was so... I mean, he used to come to the Spurs stadium and dominate games of football against us.
When they beat us 1-0 in that Conte season, he was unplayable.
He's unbelievable. And I thought we were getting an absolute diamond, but I feel like he has really let himself down at times. And I feel like with Bentancur, with the injuries as well. Like, I mean, I've had it this season where I've sort of tried to convince myself that Bentancur has been better than he is, just because of I haven't seen as much of him with the injuries. It's like you're clinging on to what he used to be, and I feel like maybe the club's doing that slightly too. I think Kish is 100% right when it comes to it's so manager dependent on what happens with those two. But
do you think, though, one thing I would say on that is that if you've got Bergvall, who is probably best in a pivot, you've got Gray. Next season, increased responsibility as a midfielder, best in a pivot. You've got Pat Matasar as well. Probably, I'm not just always putting them in key players, but we can rearrange after. But they're all going to be here next year.
Yeah,
all of those 3 players best as a pivot. Strong links to Johnny Cardozo as well, who is probably best as a more defensive-minded number 8 in a pivot. If you're not playing in Europe, you've got 4 midfielders there. Yes, 3 of them are young, 2 of them very, very young, but have already obviously shown they can make the step up. Could you get away with selling both potentially and only bringing one in if we're not going to need that deeper squad?
I think so. I definitely think you could. I think the one position that we've been crying out for so long, that I feel like some fans sort of brush over, is that 6. I was screaming for it last summer. I said it was the most important position in this squad. If you want to give Ange the best chance of going on and succeeding at Tottenham, he needs a dominant number 6. Bissouma would have been fine as a backup for large parts of this season if he only had to come in from time to time, but I feel like if we do go out, I feel like that's the only position in midfield that we really need to go out and make a statement signing in this summer. Is if you just get that big number 6 in, you got to obviously pray for the injuries and stuff and hope that the luck is on our side with that. And then maybe you have Archie Gray who can step in and sort of take minutes off him, come on at the end of games, start in the cups, etc. Maybe plays the 8 next to him too, and sort of get minutes and experience in that way. And I feel like if you do go out and sign that dominant number 6, which I know the market is so thin for, like, where does that actually come from? It might have to be a more younger, unproven player itself. So that could obviously mean that you might want to keep one of the more experienced players in Bentancur and Bissouma to sort of help him out. You never know.
Yeah.
But I feel like there is room to sell them, just because I don't think either of them... Like, when you look at the number 8, I'd rather have Sarr in there than either of them. I'd rather have Bergvall in there than either of them. And I'd probably rather have Gray in there than either of them too. So is there a massive need for them? Not really too sure.
Kish, I'll let you have the casting vote on that. If you want to... say for argument's sake, we change manager, we go with someone like an Iriola or a Frank who is probably going to play two number eights. What would you do with Bentancur if you had Cardozo coming in the summer plus those three players already there? Would you sell him or would you
Yeah.
keep him as a squad player?
Yeah, I'd probably sell both, to be honest. I think there's one thing to add about Bentancur is like just a caveat, like that amazing season he had. I think Conte football is so automated and robotic, and like the things they work on are literally automations over and over again. You play into the winger, he sets it back to the eight, he pings it over to the whatever. Do you know? It's so automated, and I think that's what really helped Bentancur. I think some of his issues are he doesn't scan, like he doesn't know what's around him a lot of the time. He plays off instinct. So like when he's pressed sometimes by about three players, you see him just weave in and out of them with ease. And it's like when he's playing off instinct, he's so good. But when it's like when more of the decision has to come down to him, where he should be turning out and switching play, or a player runs behind him and he hasn't checked his shoulder, like those kind of things is where he really suffers. And I think we've seen that without the Conte kind of regimented system where you just stick to it and you're the system kind of overrules. I think that's where he struggled. I would say with those three that you're looking to keep, I think they all suit double pivots better.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I think the only thing I would add for me is like obviously you're gonna have more protection when you have two in there, so you don't need that kind of unicorn profile of a Rodri or whatever as much. Like
Yeah.
when you have two in there and they're all physically capable as well and they all can defend. The only thing I think that's missing from that is like a deep passer that can like
Yes.
Yeah.
switch play, control the game, especially when we're breaking down teams and we need to kind of keep moving the ball from side to side. That's what I'd lack. That's what I think is lacking, and I think Cardoso is okay at that. Like he could definitely. Cardoso reminds me of Højbjerg, to be honest.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, he does
in
same
not
for
in a
me as
bad
well.
not in a bad way either. Like it's a similar profile. I think if we want to go to the next level, you need an elite like top deep passer,
Get
and
Harry
that's
Winks
what
back,
I'm
man.
looking for.
Get Harry Winks back, did you say?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly,
I mean, he was good
exactly.
at that, to be fair.
No,
Sometimes, I
exactly.
mean,
Yeah, yeah,
I know people. I think it comes down to like optics a lot in the modern game, where like people don't really like
Yeah.
those. It's like the same reason why like don't want to speak about it too much on this channel, but like people don't like Declan Rice for that same thing. But Declan Rice's bread and butter has been able to kind of manipulate a deep block and kind of switch to play so quickly. I feel like Angelo Stiller would probably be quite a good fit for that. I know obviously he's
yeah.
been spoken about quite a lot as
Yeah.
someone who's more of a deep passer, not as defensive minded, but someone to kind of just keep things ticking over. So it would be interesting whether Spurs do go in for Cardozo plus one more, because it feels like the
Yeah.
Cardozo thing's pretty much nailed on. But I feel like Stiller also signed a new contract at Stuttgart recently
Yeah,
as
yeah,
well,
Yeah.
so maybe he's off the table.
Kish, I just wanted to ask you about this quick. In terms of midfield for next season, I love Pap Sarr and I love Lucas Bergvall. How well do you reckon, say we sign Cardozo and then one other younger profile in there as a number 8 as well, say Bergvall and Sarr are starters in a double pivot next season, how well adapted do you think they are for the Premier League football right now?
I think they're both more than ready to play Premier League minutes. I think for me with Sarr, it's more of a. I think to be honest, I think this season he's been quite in his own head a lot, and that happens when you're in and out of
Yeah.
the team. I think
Yeah,
he's got such a good mentality where he always wants to impress, and he works so hard. Like I love Sarr. Like I really want him to stay, and I think he can get a lot better. I think I think when he's the kind of player that needs to be on the like he needs to be playing games as well to kind of improve technically and get used to kind of feeling the ball in those moments a lot more.
100%.
Um, I think with Bergvall, for me, it's more of a he's got everything to his locker. Like he can be wherever he wants to be. I think for me, it's more of like a
100%.
a mental thing with him in terms of
yeah,
that's where
agreed.
the next leap has to be. I think at times I think he wants to do too much, which again, young
Yeah.
player like for me he takes a couple more too many touches sometimes where he can do it off one, do it off two,
Yeah.
and occasionally I think he sometimes he dribbles towards the player where he should just pass it to them. If that makes sense.
Mm.
It's just those
Yeah.
small tweaks that will just come with age. Um, I'd also like him to kind of. I think he's too eager at times to get around the pitch, and with his technical ability, he can dictate games from just setting it off, 1 yard, dropping off, receiving it again, switch and play. I think more of that as well as the more energetic stuff. I think if he added that as well to his game, then he's just super complete. I mean, he's my favorite player to watch at Spurs, and I think he's
Same.
the future of the midfield. Like, yeah.
100%.
100%. Right,
That's
let's rattle off some other more obvious ones. Obviously, Kinski's going to be around here next year.
Yep.
Let's talk about the other goalkeepers very quickly. It feels like Forster will probably move on. I don't know if he's at the end of his
100%,
contract or not. Maybe
100%.
another year.
I think he is at the end of his contract this summer, isn't he?
So
I
yeah,
think
so
he is as well. I think he is.
so he'll be gone. And then it kind of comes down
one
to
of the most underrated players in this squad still.
yeah, 100%.
Unbelievable goalkeeper.
Well,
Brandon
how do you see that playing out in pre-season? Just very quickly with Kinski and Vicario, do you still definitely think that there is that hierarchy there, or whoever the manager is kind of going to give them both of them the chance to impress?
Vic's number one. I think Kinski was overhated a little bit.
Definitely.
But
that Villa game, really, I feel like he made it obviously a big mistake for that first goal, but the way he recovered after that, I thought he was superb.
He's clearly got a great mentality. I remember I was sat right behind him in the south for his debut against Liverpool, and in that first half, the confidence that he used straight away was a joke, and everyone around me was sort of saying, "Oh my God, who have we signed like this unbelievable player?" And then it switched quite quickly. But I feel like he came at a really unfortunate time for himself, where the fan base was just quite angry. They were frustrated. They were very quick to turn on people. He let in that goal against Arsenal, which obviously was poor. I don't think he's quite ready as a shot stopper. I feel like maybe that comes with just playing more minutes, and he'll just iron out those mistakes. I feel like that's so important for young players, and especially young goalkeepers. How do you really improve as a keeper without getting those minutes under your belt? But I feel like Vicario he's come back. I think he looks a little bit bulkier. I think he looks like he's clearly worked on those deficiencies that he had in his game before he got injured. I still don't think he's perfect, but I think he's a perfect shot stopper. I genuinely, I've said this to you, Ben, I can't remember a time at Spurs where there's been a shot that's gone in and I'm a bit like, whoa, like Vic shouldn't have let that in. Like, never. He's an unbelievable shot stopper, and I think he's got better in the rest of his game. So I feel like, definitely for the next couple of years, you're probably looking at Vic locking down that number one spot. But Kinski, I mean, could he get a top level loan maybe in a couple of seasons' time if he's not getting that game time over Vicario? But I feel like for next season he'll be happy being the number two, getting those cut minutes, and I feel like that would be enough for him. He's 21 years old, so I mean,
I think the age gap between them is sort of perfect in terms of like
100%.
him learning under him, and I think keepers are more patient. They're willing to wait out and see what happens. Like
Look
most
at
keepers
Martinez.
don't break in till that. Yeah, exactly. Kelleher, he's been at Liverpool for ages. I'm more than happy with our goal. I think Kinski's a massive prospect. Like I don't know why he was so overhated. I guess that everyone was angry, but he was asked to do something that any young keeper is going to struggle with, whoever they are. And with Vicario, I think the main deficiencies with him is like collecting crosses, collecting set pieces, everything else. Even I like his ball playing. I don't think he's technically amazing in terms of his actual ability, but his bravery to constantly play it and also not hesitate, which makes such a difference. That split second to just play it when you see it means that it's way less likely to be intercepted or whatever. And I think that's the key with ball playing. Often Alisson's not the greatest technical footballer, but he's sure of himself and he does it when he sees it. And I think that's the main thing with Vicario.
In terms of a goalkeeper as well, a mentality that if Vicario makes a mistake, literally zero worries about him recovering and going again. He's got one of the best mentalities in our squad, and I think future captain material. I genuinely do think he is.
I agree. I also agree, not necessarily future captain material, but also I'd say that about Kinski as well. Like again, that Villa game, the way he kind of rebounded after those mistakes.
Very confident.
I do really like that. The other two goalkeepers then, obviously Brandon Austin and Alfie Whiteman. One will probably stay, won't they?
Austin will be the third.
I'd imagine so.
Yeah,
Whiteman will probably.
Will be. I don't know how he's still here, to be honest. But fair play to him. He's a DJ as well, isn't he? So
he's got one of the most interesting kind of football, not football careers because he hasn't done much, but like he
just lives the life, man. Like he just flies out to all these countries as fourth keeper.
Yeah,
just gets paid.
Isn't he on like 10K a year? No, 10K a month, week. Sorry, I think he's on like 10K a week.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, take that. Right, okay, so let's go. I mean, Romero, obviously there's rumours about Romero being sold in the summer, but we both know how key, we all know how key these two are to Tottenham. So in an ideal world, neither of them move on. Radu Dragusin, what we're saying about, obviously it's going to be difficult with Dragusin in the summer because of his ACL. Depends how quickly he recovers from that, and maybe Spurs could get some money for him. He's obviously not a great fit for what we want to do with Ange. Even like you think of some of the managers that have been linked as well, even with Iriola, like you look at Huijsen and Zabani, like they're not constantly tasked with breaking the lines as much as Romero is, or breaking out from defence like Van der Ven is. I know Huijsen does that quite a fair bit. Zabani's very comfortable on the ball, but it's different responsibilities from your centre-back. But Dragusin doesn't fit really into that either. And again, you'd imagine with, like, we were talking just before we started, and we are going to do a manager video at some point as well, talking about how Thomas Frank might adapt. And although Brentford are very comfortable sitting in their shell at times and defending, having good box defenders is really important. Pinnock, me, Nathan Collins, etc.
You?
Me, yeah, not me. Dragusin fits that a little bit more, but that is not how Frank would probably play at Tottenham if he was to come in. You wouldn't want that from the start. So I feel like whatever manager Tottenham are going to appoint next, it's not going to... I don't feel like taking Radu Dragusin with us in that next step of this project is the right thing to do.
The problem for him as well is that Kevin Danso's come in and immediately looked a lot better than he was. And people talk about the system with Dragusin, but I just don't think he's good enough on the ball to maybe play in any... I don't
think he suits the Premier League. I just don't really think he suits the Premier.
He's so bad on the ball. Like, I mean, the amount of times in a game he would just give it away needlessly, or he play the ball that he loves is when he like sort of hits it down the line. It just always massively overhits it. It's so frustrating, and I don't see a system that he comes into. Like, if you're talking, people always say, "Oh, he'd be an amazing middle centre back in a 3." Like, whenever teams play back 3s, the middle centre half is normally, like, I mean, if you look at Spurs, we had Eric Dyer, who's underrated on the ball. Toby Alderweireld playing in the middle of a 3 at times for us as well. Yeah. Unbelievable on the ball. A lot of the time, these players in the back 3s will be tasked with switching the play quite a lot. And I don't see Dragusin being good enough on the ball to really play in many systems. Is it something he can develop? Maybe slightly, but I don't think he'll go from that to being a really technical footballer.
I also
overnight.
don't see him as like commanding enough to be the one at the centre of a back 3 that's like the organisation levels, and
he could have made up. Yeah, he could have made up for his deficiencies in other ways. I felt, even in Ange Postecoglou's system, but I don't even felt like I got enough from him defensively, really, and leadership-wise, and sort of stepping up to the plate as a guy who had experience at the Euros, playing for Romania, experience in Serie A as well. It's not like this young kid that we signed. Yes, he's 22, and yes, he's not the most experienced, but yeah, and Kevin Danso's come in, and for me, I think Kevin Danso is a fantastic backup. I really do. I think Kevin Danso as well, in terms of a player that can fit into multiple different systems, has come in and looked comfortable in Ange's system, which is obviously so demanding. He could definitely be suited to one of those sort of wide channel roles in a back 3 if he's playing in a back 2 that sits a little bit deeper. 100% Kevin Danso is Kevin Danso is the third choice backup at centre half now for Tottenham moving forward. I think 100% for me.
Yeah. What we're saying about Ben Davies then? Do you think it's because there's obviously been talk about him getting another contract?
It's time.
Do you think it's time, Kish, as well, to move on?
Yeah, I just don't see the need to extend his contract. I just think like I'd be wanting to sign a new left centre back in the summer anyway.
Have you got any in mind that you kind of... I know obviously a lot of the focus has probably been on the right side of centre-back with the rumours about Romero, but have you got anyone maybe in mind for
I did have a list. I'm trying to think who was on it. My mind's gone blank. I'll come back to you.
Oh, good.
I'll get on my list. Hold on. But yeah, in terms of Dragusin, I do feel sorry for him. I think he was signed for a system that is probably the worst possible system for him. I think also we underestimate like the margins in the Premier League are so small. So like those small weaknesses, like his on the ball looks terrible right now because the way that teams are so well coached in the league, everyone's physical athlete pretty much, and the way that like teams then worked out how bad he was on the ball, and it's not even like he looks terrible on the ball. He's not even like. I think he'd cut it in most leagues in the world. It's like that small deficiency. Teams would just let him have the ball, shape their press, kind of to surround him when he has it, and then he'd often just kick the ball out of play or whatever. I think we're in a league where like teams, first of all, can't afford to commit that high up necessarily to press the higher teams. Teams aren't as well coached like that, and also the margins aren't as big. So like he'll feel more comfortable. Like he'll probably be able to turn away from someone or just like give them one arm and push them away or whatever. I feel like it's just the Premier League. Those deficiencies are massively over kind of emphasized. But yeah, I'd sell. I don't think he's ever going to be good enough on the ball to make it here.
I'd agree with that. Now I feel like we're probably moving into all players that we'd all probably keep.
Yeah.
The one probably with the biggest question mark here is probably Sonny.
Nah.
Would you give Sonny
Let him do what
another?
he wants, man.
Yeah.
If he wants to stay, keep him. It's a really difficult one actually because obviously there's been a lot of toxicity towards him this season. I felt like I don't know, obviously because he's the captain. I don't think he's the best captain, to be completely honest. From my personal point of view, I don't know what goes on behind the scenes, but I saw stuff like, was it the Chelsea game where it's sort of like we just lost the game in like such a tough way. I don't know if it was the Chelsea game, but there was one game where he sort of went off the pitch crying, and I was
Yeah,
sort
it
of
was
looking at
Chelsea.
it thinking. Like, maybe it's overdone, but like, I just don't know if I'd want that from my captain. I feel like Sonny's a very emotional character. Maybe that could work in some situations as a captain, but I just don't feel like that's somebody who should sort of almost be leading a team necessarily. I don't think Sonny was ever built to be Tottenham captain, but obviously he was given it because of his loyalty to us and because of how brilliant he's been for us.
Yeah.
And I still
It's
feel
like he deserved it, but probably.
yeah,
And
not the
also,
best fit.
and to be honest, I also feel like at the time when he was given it at the start of last season, he was probably the obvious pick. I do
Oh
think
yeah,
that there
100%.
wasn't
And I
many
was
other
happy
players in
with
the
him
squad that
getting
you would
it.
have had over him.
No, because I was like, yeah, you're rewarding loyalty there, and man, I love Sonny. Like the things he's
I mean,
done for us, people.
Madison had just joined, and they put him as like
Yeah,
one of the vice captains, and
Vices,
Romero
yeah, it was
was
him
the
and
other one.
Romero.
Romero can't even
Yeah.
speak
yeah,
English.
exactly.
It's like
Yeah.
there's
yeah,
there's not many other
yeah.
options there.
No.
No, 100%. It was a strange one, but I still feel like Sonny staying in and around the squad for next year. Like you can do a lot worse than a backup sort of forward,
Oh
somebody
yeah,
who's
definitely.
versatile as well. And Sonny's the kind of player who, even this season, when he's been as poor as he has, when he's picked up a few little injuries from time to time as well, he's still contributed. What has he got? 20 goals and assists
I think
this season?
his
Like
output's
up
still
there.
been very decent. Yeah,
Yeah,
in the
so
circumstances.
100%, I want Odebear, I want Matisse Tell if he signs, I want Mikey Moore becoming players who get more prominent minutes instead of Sonny. I'd like to see probably Odebear become that starter on the left hand side for me
Yep.
personally. Or he can play on the right as well. He's so good with his weak foot too. It doesn't really matter for him. He's just like obviously going to win the Ballon d'Or, so we can sort of play him wherever. But I feel like if he's not getting the minutes on the left, I'd like it to be Tell, and if it's not Tell, I'd like it to be Mikey Moore. And it's like Sonny can sort of whether he'll be happy with it or not. I feel like that's the direction we need to go. Like this is what I mean when I say he can sort of do what he wants. If that's works for him and that's what he wants to do, and he just wants to stay at Spurs, then let him, give him another contract, pay him 200 grand a week. It doesn't matter to me what he's done for us. When he signed contracts when we were in the absolute pits, he deserves to have that choice for me.
Yep.
And if that's something that he doesn't want to do and he wants to still be the starter week in, week out, I want a manager to come in and be firm to say that that's not the role that he's going to play in the squad. And if that's not all right for Sonny, then he can move on. But I'd like to know, to be honest, it's very difficult, but I'd like to know before the end of this season whether he's going to be moved on this year, because I couldn't see him leave again like Harry Kane did and not sort of be able to give him that proper goodbye. It would feel wrong in my opinion.
Let him score 4 goals in a friendly against Shakhtar Donetsk and sort of
Literally.
ambiguously walk off the pitch. Whether is he waving goodbye or is he?
That killed me, man. That actually killed me. I can't see that happen again.
that
And
was
he
tough to
deserves
take.
that moment with the Spurs fans. Like he
Definitely.
really, really does.
Would
So.
you, Kish? Would you put him in key player for next year or for squad player? Do you
I'd
think
have
he
him in
should
squad
be?
player.
I'd
So,
agree
I'd
with
have him in
that.
squad
Yeah.
player. I think again, I think this is. I mean, this is probably just the nature of Twitter, but the kind of gap in opinions on Son, especially and many other players, it's like either he's so good, he should be built, the team should be built around him still. He's a legend or whatever. Obviously, I love him for what he's done, but
Yeah.
then to the he's terrible, he has no impact. Or there's somewhere definitely in between where one, I think
yeah.
when he's had less demands, where he's been able to play one game a week, he always looks sharper, so much sharper.
Yeah.
Two,
Yeah.
this is one of my main frustrations with Ange, especially at this point with Tell as well, is like he's not being played in his optimal position. Like
No.
he's on the touchline, he's being asked to consistently beat his fullback 1v1, which he can do at times, but often only to fullbacks that are of much lesser quality. Um, he needs to be closer to the goal. He needs to be in and around goal. He needs to be either kind of getting on the end of things or at least receiving on the edge of the box where you can cut inside and curl one like we've seen him do many times, which is very similar to
Yeah.
Tell as well. And I think that's one of my main frustrations and one of the reasons I've lost kind of faith in Ange is because he's
Yeah.
not optimizing a lot of our players' best abilities, while also the
Yeah.
trade-off is his system, which he's wedded to, which isn't really giving anything
What's
back for
what's
that.
that?
Like there's not
Yeah.
exactly like we at first when he came in, that you could see there was some like okay, he's playing Son as a touchline winger, but on the other side, there are things that are kind of caveating that and are making that necessary. Whereas now I don't see those things as much.
Yeah.
But yeah, with
100%.
Son, yeah, I think he should be here next season. I
Agree.
think
Yeah.
certain managers will come in and love him to be, especially someone who can kind of facilitate the transition to a new manager and someone who's been
Yeah.
around the club for a long time
Yeah.
is something that probably goes unnoticed. Like,
I
Yeah.
really thought I remember I think it was the Brentford game at home early this season, which I still think was probably our best ever performance under Ange. And the way that Ange used the fullbacks and the wingers in that game, it was one of the first. Or it was like 5 or 6 games into the season where we were using Kulusevski and Maddison as that dual kind of number, those two number 10s in midfield. And I remember Son
Why
and
did he just
Udogie in that.
abandon that?
I
Like,
don't know, but also in that game, Udogie was going round Son so much, kind of letting him come and drift inside and drive into the centre of the pitch. And I really thought we were going to kind of move away from using Sonny as that touchline winger. Maybe it's also
Yeah.
because Udogie's not been able to fully get back up to speed at all this season. Has been really stop-start, so the demands placed on him, it's easier to kind of play him as that inverted fullback when he has played. I don't know, less physically demanding, but that was when that's when I really thought we were going to go somewhere under Ange, because it was like slight tactical adaptations from last year, still playing good football, kicking on, beating teams, creating loads of chances, and I was like, this is it. And then it just never really. After that, we were never sort of able to establish any sort of consistency. That game, I always think back to as like a real moment in this,
Yeah.
where it was like that was it there, that was what we can
100%.
do, but it's never really came to fruition.
Can I just say as well quickly, I think just in general in terms of this squad, I think that the ceiling of this squad is so much higher than what we're currently showing. I feel like
It's weird when you actually do it like this and you put all of the players here. I think that's when you actually kind of realise that
we've got some.
this is not bad at all.
Yeah, we've got some unbelievable profiles. We've got some brilliant young players. I mean, we've got dual winners in the squad. We've got technicians. There are definitely a few real key areas like that right hand side, like that number 6 profile, like the depth on the left hand side as well of defence.
Yeah.
But if we sorted those, like again, we were left short in the summer. If we're left short again this summer, then we all know who to blame. But I still feel like this squad has a lot more to show.
100%. What we saying about Matisse Tell, I feel like we all want to keep him next year. How much of how much of a part do you think he could have to play if we do trigger that buy option in the summer?
Huge, yeah.
yeah,
You're very big, aren't you?
I'm so glad that I know it was just under 21s, but that he scored those 2 goals for France the other day, because it just shows, like, get him in those positions, get him in the zones closer to goal where you can see that ball striking ability, and he's lethal. Like, that ability to just quickly create separation, step inside, and just curl on top corner, like he's got that on lock. I think. Yeah, I think that's so important for him as well, because obviously I feel like he's had a rough time since he's been here, but also for
Yeah.
the fan base, especially as he's on loan. Like, if they're, it's up in the air whether we're going to sign him. I'm pretty sure. I'm from what I've read and stuff. I'm pretty sure that will be done.
I agree. Yeah.
And yeah, I think he's someone that long term we should be building around. I still have massive faith in him, and I think. Yeah, I think if you want a kind of close-ish profile to Sonny, there's a lot of differences there, but kind of that finishing ability, that ability to play in that left half space, like I think he's the one, I really like him as a character as well. I think, like, he's got
Top
personality.
mentality.
He properly, like, has stepped up and when he didn't need to. Like, do you know what I mean? He's come from Bayern.
Yeah.
He's on loan. He's only 19. He could have just hid into the background and just, like,
Yeah.
done the 6 months.
agree.
I think I've been really impressed with him, and I want him to stay around.
Same. I actually think
100%.
that Fulham performance as a whole was probably his best put together. I can't remember if he played the 90 minutes, but
Played lots till 75. I
yeah,
think,
obviously
when he got
started on the
taken off.
left, moved over to the right. He was getting shots off there. That really good run in the first half where he jinked in and out of a couple of
Yeah.
Fulham defenders, and
Yeah.
Johnson or Solanke should have been there to kind of tap it in. I'm really excited to see what we're going to see from him after the international break. Like you said about those 2 goals for France, I don't think you could have put together 2 better goals to describe what he is all about in terms of his game. Like the one where he peels off and runs in behind, and then the first one, like you said, creating that little bit of separation to shift away and bend it in the corner. There was a lot of caveats when he came from Bayern in terms of like his goals to game ratio and stuff like that, and it was always when he was coming off the bench when Bayern were maybe 3 or 4-1 up, he was kind of adding the cherry on top of the cake, and you can take that with a pinch of salt. But what was clear to see in those kind of more transitional moments when the game was more open, how much of a menace he actually was, and you want him running towards the goal. So there was so much valuable stuff to learn from that, and I feel like I really want him to stay. Like I'd echo everything both you guys said.
Yeah, can I just add as well? I think, like, to be able to at 19, get as many shots off in a Premier League game as he does, that's like a massive green
Well,
flag.
Man
Like,
United, wasn't it? It was Man United who
yeah,
had so many opportunities, and
and
it
it
was like,
doesn't,
oh,
to
the
me,
next one
like
come for him. It didn't, but
to
still.
me, it's about it's much more important about getting into those positions because from the repetition and the the amount of chances he gets, it's only natural that they'll start going in. And I think
100%.
unless it's been like a widespread in over your career, like a Timo Werner, where you're always underperforming your XG, if you can create that many chances every single game in that high level of a league, I think that there's only kind of upwards that you can go. So
Hundred
yeah.
percent, and I think our fans can be quite hypocritical sometimes, where they're all banging the drum, like really, really demanding Ange to be gone, saying that he's misprofiled loads of players and all that, and then at the same time saying that Tell's crap and shouldn't be signed for 60 million euros because he showed nothing. And it's like, well, which one do you believe then? Because it's very obvious that Ange Postecoglou has not used Tell. I mean, using him as like a hold-up player, a number 9 to like bring others into play, like it's just
To be fair,
never
there was
ever gonna. It's
there was a point
mental.
where he had no choice. Where obviously Solanke was out injured, and he didn't have Richarlison either. But yeah, I'm
Yeah, but
definitely
even so,
with you
you
on
can
that.
change. You can change how you use him up front to make
That,
us
that
more
was my issue as
threatening.
well.
I
I
think it was
think
the
I think
Alkmaar
yeah,
game, the Alkmaar game, wasn't it? The first leg where it was like, yeah, like you
Oh my
said, you
god,
can
it's
change.
awful.
He didn't have a choice in terms of personnel. He could have brought Scarlett in, but he was much more like to give Tell an opportunity. But it was the way we were playing as a whole that
You just
really
felt
didn't bring
sorry
the
for
best
him
out
though,
of him.
didn't you? You
Yeah,
just felt sorry
but
for
like
him.
there's so many ways you can play him as a nine and not have him be the one to come and collect the ball short. Like you could
Yeah,
have Madison out on the left and bring him kind of infield to pick up that kind of number 10 position, or you could have if Kulusevski was playing in midfield, make sure he gets much higher and he can receive in those kind of pockets in the number 10 position, and just make sure Tell's just on the last line trying to get in behind.
yeah,
There's so many tweaks that can be made to kind of optimize these players, and that's why I'm coming around to certain managers who are much more adaptive because I think we've got to a place where our recruitment is actually pretty strong now. We've got a really talented squad. Let's just get someone who can analyze profiles, know who plays best in what areas, and how we best kind of utilize them, and then let the squad do the talking kind of thing. I think we're at a point where the talent's so high.
100%.
agree.
Mate, get Thomas Frank in and get Tell playing in that Johan Wissa
I
role.
was literally just
He'll
I
be
was just thinking
cooking.
that when you were saying about I was just thinking exactly the same thing. Right, let's rattle through the last ones then. I feel like a lot of these are quite obvious. Dom Solanke will still be top starting
Keeper,
striker next season. Dejan Kulusevski is obviously one of the best and most important players at the football club.
love him.
Mikey Moore I can't see a world in which he goes out on loan
Squad
next year to
player.
a squad player. I feel like
He's our Phil Foden. I don't want him to go out on loan.
Agreed.
He'll be a starter within the next year or so, I think.
James Maddison, I still think, regardless of the managers, should still be a key player for Tottenham next year. I still think he's one of the most over criticised and
100%.
hated players in this playing squad.
Yeah, 100% it is.
And I want to leave the fullback discussion to the end. So let's talk about Brennan Johnson quickly.
Oh god.
Kish, what sort of wing? Well, before we kind of get onto Johnson, what sort of winger do you think Spurs should be looking to target in the summer? Again, I feel like, to be fair, with some of the managers that we're linked with, there are profiles that kind of match across the different fits, and in the world that we keep Ange as well, there's a lot of kind of correlation there. So, have you got anyone that you're sort of thinking? Because it still feels like we need one more.
It's so difficult because of the left side now is very stacked.
Stats, yeah.
So I mean, it's overstacked to be honest because Son, Tel, Moore, and Odegaard. And I thought, of course, Odegaard can play on the right, and it's hard to say without knowing who the next manager is. For me, the way I like to kind of do it is have one sort of Odegaard type player who loves the ball to feet, can combine, can beat his fullback 1v1, much more technical and dribbly type player. And then on the other side of that, a more goal heavy kind of smart mover in the box. Someone basically finish moves rather than initiate moves. And I like to have one of each on both sides, especially if we're in Europe. So on the right side, that would then be potentially at his best, Brennan Johnson,
Yeah.
and an Odegaard type player on the right. And whether that is Odegaard, if he can play both sides, or especially if we're not in Europe, I don't think it's hard to say, I guess. But for me, it would be an Odegaard probably type right winger who's left footed personally.
Yeah.
But then obviously
If
the squad's voted, so it's hard to say.
Yeah.
if we can get if there's any team that would come knocking for Brennan Johnson and give us 30 plus million for him, I'd take it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can't see that happening though.
It's not going to happen, is it? I feel like his stocks are so low at the moment. I've seen Welsh fans absolutely,
Yeah.
banging their heads against the wall with him in the international break and stuff. And I feel really sorry for Brennan Johnson at points because I think he's a great character. I feel like he suffers massively from a lack of confidence. I feel like he's a real confidence player,
Yeah.
someone who needs to be loved and have that love around him. And I feel like he's contributed really well at times.
You can't put a price on the output like that he's had for Tottenham over the last couple of seasons.
I just think what he doesn't give us outweighs what he does give us, in my personal opinion. And I'm not sure he's a top four. I know we're not top four, obviously, right now, but where we want to be aiming, I'm not sure Brennan Johnson is somebody who will take us there.
Not as a starter. Not as a starter.
Maybe,
he's
you're
never-
right.
he's
As
never
a
a
squad
starter.
player,
No.
as a squad player, potentially 100%. But then if you're looking at giving minutes to somebody like an Audebert, a Tell, a Mikey Moore, if Audebert's going to go and play on that right hand side to find those minutes next season, if Sonny's still there, which is the most likely case, then are you taking minutes away from him and then not signing another player because Brennan Johnson's there? If I know, like you say, it's one of those things that's probably quite unrealistic, and he will stay as a squad player, and I would put him in squad player. But if we could go out and make a right winger signing, a signing on that side, and sort of move on Johnson over the next couple of years, I'd probably look to do that. But for now, yeah, I'd agree on squad player.
Yeah,
I think
as well. Sorry, go
Yeah, I
on.
was just going to say, I think Tell's a problem for Johnson because
Yeah,
I think he'll potentially start bringing good output, and maybe not to the numbers Johnson does, but good output, but with also not being abysmal in all-round play. Like
Yeah.
obviously he's not going to be a 1v1 specialist. He's not going to be really creative, but he can do those things to an okay level. Like he can put
yeah,
nice crosses in. He can beat his fullback when he needs to. And
yeah,
I think Johnson, if he even upped his like 1v1 ability and his just comfort in possession to like an okay level, then we could kind of carry it. But at the moment, it's so low that if he does go through games not scoring, it's genuinely like playing with 10 players.
Yeah.
And yeah, you can't afford to be doing that at this level. So it's a difficult one with him, I think.
And the last thing on Johnson I'd say is that there's been times this season where I really haven't felt sorry for him, and I don't know if it's a system thing. 'Cause I think we've seen it regularly from a lot different wingers as well. But it's just like he doesn't show in possession. He doesn't really look to try and stretch his fullback by sort of spinning and making those run in behind when, say, Porro's on the ball, Romero's on the ball. There's been so many times this season where I've literally just watched him stood there on the right hand side and just thought, you're really not helping yourself by doing this. And then when he sort of receives the ball, the fullback is the one who's anticipating that and is so tight to him quickly. And it's like Brennan Johnson, every time he receives the ball with his back to play, it just looks like he doesn't want it. And yeah, like you said,
He must be a nightmare for. I feel like he's not as much of a problem in build up if you're playing with Kulusevski as that right hand side number 10. But if you're
definitely.
Porro or Romero trying to build up on that right hand side, and yeah, Johnson is so flat footed coming off the touchline. So and also like just flat footed and lethargic in his defensive work rate as well, which I think again might be a system thing. I don't know whether it's Ange always wanting to leave kind of two wingers up, but the amount of times, like, and we'll come on to talk about the fullbacks now. I think, like, we'd obviously agree on Johnson shouldn't necessarily be sold actively, but maybe if someone was to come in, use that money to reinvest it elsewhere. But with Porro, then I kind of want to put, like, we all know that these three are going to be here next year. I kind of want to put two up into that key player role almost as starters and then leave one out. I do feel like with Porro, he gets partly over criticised as a result of, or because of the system and because of the lack of help that he does get. And I personally still think that he should be a starter in this team. I think it should be him and Spence as kind of the optimal fullback pairing for the rest of the season. Kish, to kind of finish off, like if you were to bump two of these up, assuming that I still think we need to sign a left back next year as well. Definitely. Probably more of a different sort of profile to a Doggy. We've been linked with Ait-Nouri. He's a player that I love a lot. And
also, didn't realize how young he was as well. He's only 24 or 23. I think.
He's been at Wolves for, like, it feels like he's been around for ages.
Yeah.
What do you feel like if you had to leave one of these players maybe as a bench player for next year, say for argument's sake, if two of them are the starters, who are you bumping up and who are you keeping in that squad player section?
So I think we'd all agree that Spence is one of the first players on the team sheet now, for me with Spence as well is I think whatever manager comes in, he can thrive. He can play any type of fullback role. I think also often people keep doing this is like they see a player who's good on the ball and think we should play with wing backs. I don't think that's not like Spence. I've been saying Spence's. Oh, he's playing so well and he's not even a fullback. Like no, he's a fullback. I think he's so good in like when we're under so much pressure and he gets the
Yeah.
ball and like we're trying to get out of that first line of pressure and he just feints in one way and goes the other way, or like he'll just hold off someone and spin and keep the ball. Um, but he is also capable of kind of covering big spaces like on transition, whether that was in a wing back role, like I think he could do it. Whether that's like a traditional fullback role or they want him to kind of play more infield as an inverted player, he can kind of do it all, and that's why I think he's so valuable. Um, and that's why I'm so confident that any manager will kind of love him. Um, the other two are much more specific, I'd say. The doggy worries me at the moment, to be honest. Like since that injury, and I do think Ange's system has been the most hard for the fullbacks in terms of
Yeah.
intensity wise. The amount of kind of sprints they have to do to first be an option, often in the number 10 areas, like when we're building up, then occasionally, like we said earlier about the Brentford thing, but they also have done it at other times to a lesser extent, like overlapping, going all the way back round their winger. And then if we lose the ball, recovering, 40, 50 yards to go and kind of get back into the back four. I think that's taken its toll on Doggy. And he looks stiff, like he looks sluggish, um his like agility looks rough. And the thing I loved about him so much when he first arrived is his ability to receive on the turn and like to
Yeah.
to be able to just like feint out of pressure and then just carry the ball so well. And at the moment he just looks reserved. Like he doesn't look like he just doesn't look the same player. And I think a lot of that will probably come down to repetition and hopefully he'll just kind of he'll get a run of games and he'll find that kind of intensity again. I think um, that's just one I'm concerned about, and I haven't seen that side of him again. But he's so young, and he has those abilities which are crazy. And then with Porro, I think he's someone who we lack in the squad as a deep passer.
Yeah.
Like he's creative. He's great at that kind of lofted. What you were saying about Dragusin earlier about how he when he plays down the line he consistently plays it off the pitch. Porro that kind of lofted ball down the line for an onrushing winger or when Solanke pulls out wide in the channel,
Yeah.
like
The
he'll
Liverpool
always
game
get
was
that
probably the
spot
best
on.
example of that in the cup, wasn't it?
Yeah,
The
He's
yeah,
so
so
first
good.
leg, yeah, he was
So
exactly.
amazing
good.
in that game.
The only issue I have with him is like his temperament is like he constantly wants to do that. He constantly wants to be the hero.
Yeah.
He's so overexcited and kind of over enthusiastic, which I do like. But when we're trying to control games, often that's not the answer. And like also, the more you do it, the easier it is to defend because they'll just drop off and you're just
Yeah.
spamming it when it's not on. And he's capable of
Yeah.
playing intricate passes, shorter passes. But the same happens when he's like 30 yards out. He'll just shoot, and it's just like the shot's not even on. Like you're barely balanced. Like you haven't even set yourself, and he just shoots, and it goes like way over. So I think he needs coaching still, and I know he's not super young, but those things are very very coachable. Like
100%.
they're
I
not
agree with that.
with they're not in him. So yeah, I think that's my kind of my take on all three of those. But I think Spencer's the one to beat right now.
Yeah. I agree with that.
Yeah,
Seb?
100%. Yeah, I completely agree. I think with a doggy, it's just a case of if whoever the manager is come pre-season, I'm just going right. You take 2 months off, go and do whatever you need to do, and just have a break because I feel like a doggy has not had a break from either rehabbing from injuries like he was over pre-season to being coming straight back into the team at the start of this season. Like you said, he just feels sluggish at the moment. It feels like he's somebody who needs some time off, a reset, pre-season, probably some different coaching, fresh ideas, fresh voices in his head. And I feel like that's the case with a lot of these players. And I feel like we're almost going to have to do a thing this pre-season where it's like, okay, how much was Ange influencing the form that this player was in compared to sort of how much another manager can influence it, and what is the ceiling there with that player? And I feel like with all three of those, they've still got really high ceilings as footballers. I think, especially Jed Spence and Pedro Porro. I think in terms of the qualities they could give a team, are like absolutely exceptional, and yeah, Doggy as well is included in that for me. I feel like being the left footer, Doggy probably has a slight advantage over Pedro Porro, just in terms of I think Spencer's a lock, and I think in terms of balance in a build up, I think it will probably be Spence and a Doggy if everyone is playing well there. So I feel like I feel like Porro as well. He's never going to be the best one-on-one defender. He's never going to be the most dominant fullback in terms of defending the top wingers in the league. I feel like I was banging the drum for him at the end of last season and the start of this season. I felt like he made strides in that area of his game. I don't feel like he gets enough help from the wingers coming back the other way as well, and he does get left isolated 2v1 a lot of the time. And I feel like when you get beat 2v1 and it's sort of they'll play in a fullback on the overlap, and it's like, well, what was Porro really supposed to do there when people are getting really annoyed at him? And it's not like somebody just absolutely twisted him up, but also that can happen too. So yeah, I feel like Porro is probably the one who's at a slight disadvantage there, but Porro is also one of those players where if you're playing a team who sit a bit deeper at home, you're not starting Pedro Porro because he is the best fit out of those three in those sort of situations. And I feel like those three complement each other so well as three fullbacks in a squad. If you get another one in there, like an Nori, for example, then you've got a really complete set of fullbacks there, in my personal opinion. And it's like we've said so many times, like, how much is all of this affected by Ange Postecoglou? Next season, it could easily be a case of us saying, we've got some of the best fullbacks in the league, we're banging the drum for a Doggy being the best left-back in the league again, Porro being the best right-back or whatever. And I feel like it's one of those where it'll be really, really exciting to see in pre-season and stuff, but everyone just needs a couple of months off, a month and a half. Just go and kick your feet up, lads, have some family time, and then come back to it in pre-season, wherever we are.
I feel like the fullbacks is probably a good way to let the comments decide on that one between Porro and Doggy, because I feel like like you said, we have got three really good options at the club, like three very varying profiles as well. It's probably just a case of adding one more on top.
That's probably right, isn't it? It's probably Spence as the lock, and then the other two are squad players who come in when the game suits it.
I think so. I think so with that. Is there anyone else we want to... Obviously, we kind of... Bergvall, Gray and Sarr, we were kind of putting here from the start. Is there anyone that you'd maybe move down out of those three into squad player, or do you all think they're going to be... All three of them are going to be key players for next year before you wrap up?
Gray will be squad player, personally. I think Bergvall and Sarr... I don't know, it's weird. A lot of people probably wouldn't have Sarr as a key player, and he might be a squad player next year. I don't think it's going to be a case of him starting every single game. But also, I just think Pap Sarr is such a unique player in that squad as well, in terms of somebody who can eat up the ground. Yeah. Like, defending transitions, on transitions as well. He's underrated carrying the ball. Like, when he's got a bit of space to run into, I still feel like he's got a higher ceiling than people give him credit for technically as well, in terms of how he can use the ball in those midfield areas. Like, we've seen it at times, like massively, like last season and stuff. The start of last year, I remember how good he was. And yeah, like Kish said, he's definitely got a way to go mentally and a way to go sort of development-wise in his own game, in terms of just really having that confidence in himself, which I feel like is the case with a lot of our young players because they're young. I feel like Archie Gray is that one who I think he'll be used as a squad player, and depending on how he sort of plays in the early parts of next season, could make that step up to being a key player. But at the start, I think he's squad.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
I'd say on Sarr as well, just to add, like if you look across the squads in the Premier League, every manager wants a player like him in a Premier League squad. Like,
yeah, for sure.
In terms of that physical profile, the ability to cover ground, to run for 90 minutes without kind of even breaking a sweat, and being physical in those duels. Like he's a great duel winner. Yeah. Those players don't come around that often, and every single squad that I can think of has one. And obviously they're varying of quality in terms of their other attributes, but that he's vital, and we don't, to be honest, barring him, don't really have that in the squad. So I think he's a key. He's 100% a key squad player, whether that's starting week in, week out, or at least starting half the games in my eyes next season. And that's obviously dependent on Bentancur Basuma's futures as well, obviously.
Bringing him off the bench though as well, if you're looking to close out a game, is an unbelievable player to bring on. I mean, we've seen him this season come on and almost like press as a second striker and be a guy who can sit in as well. Yeah, I mean, I've seen some people say sell Sarr in the summer, which I genuinely think is mental. And it's like it's like these players see a player who's not like a Lucas Bergvall who can turn on a sixpence and just use the ball unbelievably well, and they're like, well, they're not good enough. And it's like you need different profiles in a squad. When has a squad ever had, apart from Man City, probably have 23 players that are incredibly comfortable on the ball in any scenario? Like, it just doesn't happen, and we're never going to be at that level. So, yeah.
Right, I think we're done. I think we're wrapped up. That is our Tottenham
Lovely.
keep or sell for next season. Let us know anything you agree or disagree with in the comments. I'm going to leave the link to this in the comments as well, so you guys can do it, and feel free to screenshot it and send it our way with anything you change differently. Thanks to Seb and for Kish for coming on. Kish, Lilywhite Lab, doing some brilliant stuff over there. Seb, obviously on TikTok, you'll know Seb. YouTube as well. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Nice one.